Chapter 61 Crossing Paths. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. According to the coordinates that Isroth received from the exploration logs, the dungeon Sea Palace Graveyard was located south of Amaharp. It was currently the nearest dungeon to Amaharp and had a level range of 18.23. The level range was the recommended level for a player to attempt a dungeon, but there were no actual requirements to enter a dungeon. So, in theory, a level 10 player could enter inside of a level 20 dungeon. However, surviving once inside was a different story altogether. Also, it would be useless for higher level players to try and power level lower level players. Power leveling was when higher leveled players would take lower leveled players along to a place beyond their original capabilities, and attempt to increase their level rapidly by clearing monsters there. However, RML had a merit-based EXP distribution system that was strict when it came to parties with large level gaps. This meant that if a player did not contribute enough to the battle, then they would obtain a negligible amount of EXP. The system possessed its own unique way of determining a player's contribution to a battle. As Isroth was walking on the road that ran south of Amaharp, he came to a forest that was similar to the Willowed Forest he traveled through on his way to the capital city. This forest had gigantic trees that easily reached heights of over 100 meters, making the trees inside of Willowed Forest look miniature in comparison. System alert. You have entered the Towering Oak Forest. The trunks of the trees were so wide that even 5 people linking hands would not be able to fully wrap around the tree. The ground of the forest was covered in verdant grass that appeared to be almost unrealistically perfect. Before traveling further into the Towering Oak Forest, Isroth removed a 5 cycles pill from his inventory. A strong medicinal smell instantly rushed out towards him and invaded the surrounding atmosphere. When Isroth consumed the pill, it instantly dissolved within his mouth and a refreshing feeling ran throughout his entire body. Everything around him suddenly became increasingly vivid and his overall sense of perception rose tremendously. Thanks to his natural experience, along with being at the second stage of the heavenly golden body physique, Isroth's senses could already be considered as monstrous even when compared to top players. So adding the 5 cycles pill to the equation provided a great boost. Isroth wanted to wait until he was in a place with monsters lurking nearby in order to feel the difference between and after using the 5 cycles pill. He needed to have a full grasp of his sense of perception. The difference really is huge. My overall sense of perception has risen at least twofold. The deeper Isroth journeyed into the forest, the more he felt as if he was being watched. But this was not like that feeling back at the Valley of Death, where it was similar to the gazing artifact. This was someone observing from a far away distance. Whoever or whatever it is was close. Isroth frowned. That feeling did not disappear even after traveling for 5 minutes. Someone was definitely observing him. Even with my senses heightened to such a degree, someone still managed to get this close before I could discover them. Interesting. The fact that someone could get so close to Isroth without him realizing it meant that the person was incredibly skilled at hiding their presence. So much so that they appeared to be one with their surroundings in a natural manner. Just as Isroth was about to call out, bushes that were around 20 meters away from him rustled a bit. It was in the same general direction that Isroth felt as if he were being watched from. What stepped from out of the bushes was a young man that looked as if he was in his mid to late 20s. The young man had short dark red hair that was slightly spiky, and crimson red eyes with pupils that looked abnormal. The pupils resembled a lemniscate and were just like an infinity symbol. There was this strange light red energy constantly running in an infinite loop around the lemniscate. The young man was quite handsome and stood at around 178 centimeters tall, and possessed a very lean build, but he was not at all bulky in any way. On the right side of his face was a small tattoo sitting just under his right eye of a symbol or shape that Isroth had never seen before. The young man gave off a very calm aura, but underneath that calm aura was a ferocious beast. It was very similar to the aura that Isroth himself naturally gave off at times. The young man stopped a few meters away from Isroth. When the young man stepped out, Isroth's feeling of being watched disappeared completely. The strange thing was that the aura this person gave off was a bit different from the one earlier, but he may have just been imagining it. Nice timing. On top of a tree branch more than 50 meters away from Isroth was a shadowy figure. It was the same shadowy figure that had been following Isroth since he was back in the willowed forest. I did not expect for his strength to increase so rapidly. He may be ready sooner than I anticipated. It seems as though I have to be more careful from now on and maintain a further distance or I'll risk being discovered. The shadowy figure was impressed by Isroth being able to sense him. Due to a special ability that the shadowy figure possessed, even those who were many times stronger than he was would not be able to notice him. If that other player did not appear when he did, then the shadowy figure may have had to reveal himself earlier than he wanted to. Oh. That other guy is pretty interesting too. The shadowy figure turned into a blur before disappearing from his current position. Isroth examined the player who stopped a few meters away from him. He was unsure of what their intentions were, but he was not afraid of a fight if the player that stood before him wanted one. Isroth found something intriguing about this player besides his strange eyes, and it was the two swords were placed upon his back. Based on the knowledge Isroth recently acquired, there should be no dual-wielding classes within RML this earlier into the game. The young man was sizing up Isroth and narrowed his eyes when he realized that it was impossible to get a solid grasp on Isroth's strength. This was the first time the young man ran into this kind of player. He was just heading back to town to turn in a quest when he had a strange feeling as if someone was hiding their presence nearby. But even with his eyes, he could not lock onto their exact location. That was when he discovered Isroth. "Do you have some business with me?" Isroth still had a carefree expression on his face and his tone of voice sounded relaxed and without worry. This player had approached him first and so he did not know of his intentions. Amusing. I was going to ask you the same question. When the young man spoke, his voice was tranquil. It was as if just by listening to his voice alone one would find themselves at peace with the world around them. System alert. You are being targeted by a mental skill. System alert. You have successfully passed a willpower check. Even though Isroth was immune to the mental skill of that player, he could still tell that it was not a normal skill. The facial expression of that young man changed for a brief moment and a small frown appeared on his face, however, it quickly disappeared. That skill. It's almost similar to a. Isroth narrowed his eyes slightly. This person was the first to make a move against him and so he would not be polite. Isroth kicked off his left foot and as he did so, his right foot struck out like a snake wanting to sink its teeth into its prey. He used the skill, Serpent's Bite. The player standing before Isroth took half a step back at the very last moment and avoided the incoming kick. He then reached out with the palm of his hand aiming directly at Isroth's right shoulder area. As that palm was rushing to hit Isroth's right shoulder, Isroth shifted his left foot forward half a step and narrowly evaded the attack. At the same time, Isroth launched a counter-attack as his palms rapidly descending at the other player, leaving behind a myriad of illusions that appeared realistic. This was the skill Myriad Elusive Palms and it was exceedingly difficult to avoid its one true strike. Just as Isroth's palm was about to strike at that player dead center in his chest, something bizarre happened. The hand of that player appeared to be moving so slow that it was almost as if it were not moving at all. However, as his hand was moving, it left behind a trail of afterimages and each one shot out to meet with one of the palms aimed at him. All of the incoming strikes were being intercepted by that player. But just as he believed he blocked the skill successfully, his eyes widened slightly as he tried to immediately retreat. However, it was too late and the palm struck him dead center in his chest area slightly to the left side where his heart should be located. He was knocked back by the force of the palm and slid backward a few meters before coming to a halt. He had a look of disbelief written all over his face. When was the last time he lost an exchange? Isroth was fairly impressed by this player and their reaction time. If it was before Isroth consumed the 5 cycles pill, then it may have taken him a few more moves before he landed a blow. Besides that, this player managed to avoid a direct hit and reacted in time to minimize the impact of the blow, and so they only receive a partial amount of damage. The player who was just knocked back by Isroth stood up straight and stared at Isroth. This time, however, his gaze was becoming increasingly serious. There was also a look of respect hidden away behind that gaze. "May I know your name?" Although his tone was not submissive in any way, he still spoke in a respectful tone as if Isroth was his equal. True experts could somewhat gauge the strength of someone from a brief exchange. Aegis knew that if he were to fight seriously against this player, he would not necessarily have an advantage over him. Isroth still had that carefree expression on his face as he spoke. "Isroth. Isroth. I see. I shall remember that name. I hope that you can remember mine as well, as we will definitely cross paths once more in the future. I can see it clearly. I am called Aegis." "Oh. You sound as if you're about to leave. Why not stay a bit longer and exchange some pointers with me?" Of course, Isroth did not really need anyone to exchange pointers with. It was just that so far the players he had come across were disappointing, to say the least, when it came to combat. In order to further improve upon the heavenly golden body and to gain more experience from fighting against other players, he needed someone who could live through more than one or two of his moves. Isroth the impression that Aegis did not use his full power during that brief exchange, however, neither did he. He was interested in seeing exactly how strong this person before him was and if he could level up his heavenly golden body skill in the process, or at least make some progress. Aegis shook his head. "Normally I would never turn down a fight. However, I have already made other plans, so I'll have to decline your generous offer. I insist that you stay." Isroth's voice was still carefree and calm, but that was only how others would see it. Aegis' awareness level was much greater than that of normal players. Other players may only see the surface of things, but he could see it with his eyes. This player called Isroth was another monster. Aegis furrowed his brows. He was a little regretful that he would not be able to fight against Isroth. "As I've said before, I have plans. So you'll have to pardon me." The space located before Aegis distorted and his figure began to turn into a blur. In an instant, he disappeared from the spot he was previously standing at. That skill resembles the one that Terminus used back in the Combat Master class building. It looks like a skill that allows for its user to travel instantaneously. There was nothing that Isroth could do about it now since Aegis left in such an abrupt manner. The power he used earlier seemed incredibly familiar. "I wonder." Isroth was thinking to himself as he continued onward towards the dungeon. See Palace Graveyard. Around 20 minutes later, located somewhere within Amaharp, a male player walked into a building that did not have much traffic when it came to players. That male player was Aegis, and as soon as he stepped into the building, someone spoke in an agitated tone of voice. "You're late, Aegis. What makes you think you have the qualifications to make us wait?" The player who spoke was a woman with long purple hair that went down to the lower end of her back and possessed violet-colored eyes that gave off a mystical feeling. With her appearance and figure, she could easily be mistaken for a professional model. She had curves in all the correct places, and even just sitting down in a chair was done with a high level of grace. In total, there were 11 other players sitting or standing around the room, making for a total of 12 players. This was including Aegis now that he finally arrived. "Should I remind you of my qualifications to do so, Misfia?" Aegis looked coldly at the woman who just spoke to him. "All right, you too. If someone did not have the qualifications to be here, then they would not be here. We have more important topics to discuss right now. However, you should give us a reason for your tardiness, Aegis. It's very unlike you." The one who spoke this time was a male player covered from head to toe in a black cloak. Even if you looked closely, you would be unable to see their facial features. This player went by the name of Zalvazek. "I just ran into someone interesting and got delayed, that's all." Aegis kept things nice and simple. Misfia narrowed her eyes when she heard that statement. Although she was annoyed from having to wait for Aegis, she was no fool and knew that he was very powerful. Someone capable of catching his attention was most likely not normal at all. Oh. Someone interesting enough to grab your attention. Do you know their name? Zalvazek was a bit surprised. Aegis was not the kind of person to use the term interesting lightly. He called himself Isroth. The moment Aegis said that name, all 11 of the players seemed to pay more attention and look in his direction. Did you say Isroth? Zalvazek appeared to be thinking about something, however, he quickly pushed the thought to the back of his mind. It's probably just a simple coincidence. Well, enough of that. Now that you're here we can finally begin. Chapter 62 Crosshaven. You're listening at NovelFull.audio. Isroth carefully avoided the monsters inside of the towering oak forest. He planned on saving the temporary skill equalizer when he arrived at the Sea Palace graveyard in order to maximize its usefulness. After traveling 20 minutes south at top speed, Isroth arrived at the other side of the towering oak forest. Thanks to the 5 cycles pill, it allowed him to navigate through the forest avoiding monsters or hidden dangers along the way. The first thing that came into view was the vast amount of sand that stretched as far as he could see. The strange thing about this site was the lack of heat normally found in a desert as well as the abrupt change in environment. Strange. The coordinates showed that the dungeon Sea Palace graveyard was around 5 minutes east from his current location. But even with how great his vision was, Isroth could not see an entryway into the dungeon. He continued in the direction of the coordinates listed on the exploration logs. A little less than 5 minutes later, Isroth came to the edge of a sand dune. At the bottom of the dune, sand constantly swirled around and began sinking into the earth itself, similarly like quicksand. A frown found its way onto Isroth's face as he checked the coordinates again, making sure that this was the correct location. These are the exact coordinates. He began to examine the surroundings of the sand dune, as well as the bottom area of the sand dune. There really was no entrance around this place, no matter how thoroughly he checked. Eliminate all other factors and the one that remains must be the truth. This was the correct location and there was only one thing that seemed to be an entrance. Isroth stared at the swirling sand at the bottom of the sand dune, which was constantly sinking into the earth. He then slid down the sand dune and fell right into the sinking sand and soon after disappearing from sight. System alert. You have entered the ruins of Kashish Edi. When Isroth fell through the sinking sand, he traveled for around 20 seconds on a path that felt as though it were going straight down. After finally coming to a halt, everything around him changed. I suppose that explains why I could not see a dungeon entry before, as it was located underground. Well, it's more preferable to being underwater at the very least. While Isroth entered the ruins of Kashish, he had not yet entered into the dungeon, as the ruins were only a precursor to the dungeon itself. In the distance, he spotted a circular gateway with strange unknown symbols lit up in a light blue color. The surrounding buildings appeared to be from an ancient civilization that met with some kind of disaster, as everything was in ruins. However, with a single glance, anyone would be able to tell that this civilization was quite advanced for its time. When Isroth stepped forward, his foot knocked into something laying on the ground. Held in his hand was a mermaid figurine made similarly out of stone. However, the object was still badly damaged, as it was missing a few chunks of the figure itself, as if someone threw the object in a rush to run away from the disaster that struck this civilization, as well as surviving the decay of time. Over 20.4 players stood near the gateway patrolling the gateway as one of them entered inside of the circular gateway, flashing with a brilliant light. When the light dimmed down, the player had vanished into thin air. That has to be the entrance into the dungeon. Sea Palace graveyard. Isroth took a brief period of time to observe the players near the gateway. Even though there were originally 20.4 players there, only 18 of the players went inside. The other 6 players were guarding the dungeon entrance, preventing others from entering. Why do we have to be the first group in guard duty? It should have been Jonah's group that goes in last on the rotation. One of the players guarding the entrance of the gateway was dissatisfied with their current circumstances. It can't be helped since one of their members were amongst the first to discover the dungeon. If it hadn't been, then they would have been last in the rotation as always. His partner said as he was more understanding of the situation, unlike his guildmate. Well, it's not like they were really first or anything. The main guild members were a part of the first wave anyways. We're fortunate to have met some of the core members while doing this, so it isn't all bad. He felt that it was not a bad trade-off, staying guard in order to meet some higher-ranked guild members they may not ever have the chance to meet personally. You know, I heard that there's a hidden boss inside with an insanely low spawn rate. In fact, only the guild leaders group who made the first run came across it. Get this, it's a rare boss. One of the party members who remained silent suddenly spoke up, trying to join in on the conversation. Are you kidding me? That has to be a lie. Between all the groups, this place has already been run over 100 times, so even if we combine them all together, what you mean to tell me it only appeared once? It's probably just some guild members starting rumors. She scoffed at the ignorance of her fellow guild member for buying into that ridiculous rumor. Isroth had been listening on their conversation long enough as he walked towards the circular gateway. Every second he wasted standing around and waiting was another moment top players were leveling up. He'd been idle long enough. As Isroth was approaching the gateway, the 6 players who were guarding nearby became alert. However, their guard was lowered as they saw that it was just one person. If possible, they would rather not run into a troublesome group while it was their turn to stand watch. You'll have to stop right there. This dungeon is currently under the ownership of Crosshaven, so your journey here has been wasted, said the male with the appearance of an 18-year-old and slicked-backed hair and the display name of Arktim. He presented himself as the leader of the party as he was the first to speak out when he saw Isroth approaching. While this was not the first time that people ventured down here, it was the first time that someone appeared traveled solo. The exit is over that way. It won't take you back to where you came from. However, if you got to this place in one piece, then you shouldn't be in any danger when you exit out. Arktim said as he pointed towards a gateway located on the other side of the room. Its shape was almost exactly like the circular gateway that led into the dungeon. Isroth frowned inwardly when he heard them speak. He'd already expected something like this to happen based on the words they spoke and seeing them be the sole group to stay behind. But, someone deciding that an entire dungeon belonged solely to their group was quite ridiculous. Most top guilds went by a certain silent code. As long as the prize wasn't too valuable, they would give each other some face and let the finder benefit for a set period of time. This certainly did not include things like world bosses, mining sites, or locations where valuable herbs grew, as top guilds would plot and manipulate to obtain such benefits. However, conditions for an early dungeon were different, in which as long as the first clear was claimed by the guild, that same guild would have control over it for a period of time. This was a silent agreement that all the top guilds had with one another, while also restricting casual players as they were excluded from having a say in such a manner. If such players forced their way in, they should be prepared for the consequences of such actions. Last time I remembered, dungeons were for all players, not just a specific group of people. If I want to enter into this dungeon, it's a right I have and you don't have the power to revoke. Isroth was already here, so why would he give up and leave after traveling all this way? Arktim's facial expression grew dark when he heard those words. He was trying to be polite, but this player talked to him as if he didn't take the name Crosshaven to heart and completely ignored his kindness. Crosshaven is one of the most powerful groups in the MMORPG community. Needless to say, all of that power naturally transferred over to RML. This was something of common knowledge to nearly anyone who plays MMORPGs. Since you don't want to listen when I try to be reasonable, then don't blame us. We're just following orders. Arktim nodded his head at his fellow party members and they all drew their weapons, getting ready to attack Isroth. Even if he was just one player, they did not know his strength or abilities. It was always better to play it safe, especially since there was a penalty for death. They were not leaving anything to chance. Isroth narrowed his eyes as his hand rested on the hilt of the blade of lightning placed upon his back. If they wanted to respond with force, then he would not hesitate to fight back. Besides, this might be a good time to test out the lightning field skill attached to the blade of lightning. Just as the group was about to make their move, the gateway behind them lit up in light as a party of 6 players exited from within. When one of the players looked over and saw Isroth and then the group of 6 players about to attack, their face immediately darkened. "Stop!" A furious voice sounded from inside of the gateway as a player jumped down from it. The player who jumped down from the gateway was a young boy, or at least his appearance was as such. The young man was so short that he would often be mistaken for a child. His hair was dark red, while his crimson-red eyes possessed irises resembling that of a ferocious tiger. This young man's name was Wes and he was one of the lieutenants of the guild Crosshaven. The 6 members standing guard were all startled by the sudden arrival of Wes as well as him shouting, but a smile appeared on all of their faces. Now that Wes was here, this situation was as good as dealt with and they wouldn't need to lift a finger. However, what occurred next was beyond their expectations. "Are you all incapable of following simple instructions? Put your weapons away." Wes glared at the group of 6. All 6 of them were dumbfounded, but they listened to his orders and put their weapons away. When did they not follow instructions? They were just guarding the gateway as per their instructions and now they were being scolded. Life truly is unfair. Isroth furrowed his brows as he observed the events unfolding before him and not understanding what was going on. Wes then looked towards Isroth. Was a smile formed on his face. He seemed to behave in a friendly manner when it came to Isroth. This person was someone that caught Yuan's eye, so it was best to maintain a friendly relationship. There were not many people aware of this fact within Crosshaven, but this player before him may eventually join their guild. While Crosshaven did not lack talented players, RML was a different breed of a game compared to the classic MMORPGs. Yuan was planning for the future of RML and what would eventually become the main focus for all of the top guilds. It would be something that separated the strong from the weak as Yuan was preparing ahead of time for when it became a reality. Wes understood that there was a reason for every action Yuan took, therefore, when he viewed members of their own guild getting ready to fight against Isroth, he couldn't help but become upset. Though, a simple scolding was sufficient since he knew that the group was just following their orders. "I am Wes, a lieutenant of the guild Crosshaven. You'll have to excuse the behavior of my guild members." Although Wes was smiling and acted friendly, his gaze resembled that of a ferocious tiger and he was attempting to see through Isroth, but to his amazement, he was unable to. Isroth removed his hand from the hilt of his blade of lightning. He was a bit disappointed that was currently unable to test the lightning field skill, however, there was always another time. What confused Isroth more than anything was how friendly Wes was acting. He doesn't appear to be up to something but. Isroth did not detect any ill intentions from Wes, however, the way Wes was sizing him up did not go unnoticed. Chapter 63 The Other Side of the Gateway. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Wes let out a sigh of relief inwardly. If a fight broke out before he arrived here, then it may have already been too late to keep a friendly relationship with Isroth. The situation would have been even worse if someone was killed in the process and a grudge was permanently formed. Wes was the highest-ranking guild member present and so the responsibility rested with him to keep the situation under control. Yuan would not punish him, he would be disappointed with his performance. There were 2 full parties of 6 players present, making for a total of 12 players. Most likely all of these players were at a higher level than Isroth. Even though Isroth did not fear a fight against them, he would prefer not to waste his time doing so. Isroth still remained vigilant as he spoke with a carefree expression on his face, a small miscommunication, I'm sure. However, if you also plan on telling me that I'm unable to enter this dungeon, then you'll have to forgive me for being impolite. The Crosshaven players were all baffled by how someone with such a calm and carefree appearance could be so arrogant. There were 12 of them and only a one of him, and not to mention the fact that Lieutenant Wes was also present. Did this guy have a death wish? Wasn't their lieutenant already being beyond understanding? Wes smiled, he was intrigued. Personally, Wes wanted to fight against Isroth to see what exactly made him so confident, though there was another reason as well. Wes was recruited by Ewan himself and is the most recent addition to the main roster for the Crosshaven Guild. It was only natural that he would have a competitive spirit against someone else who was being scouted by Ewan. He wanted to see which of them was the better player as his battle aura rose when Isroth said those words. But in the end, reason won Wes over and he let out a disappointed sigh. There was plenty of time to see who was better in the future when Ewan finally makes his move. There's no need for that. While it's true that this dungeon is currently under the jurisdiction of my Crosshaven Guild, exceptions can be made. Of course, you can enter inside if you'd like. If anyone gives you trouble here again, just mention my name. The previous battle aura that was swelling up inside of Wes vanished completely. Isroth did not understand why Wes held himself back, as he clearly wanted to fight, but he didn't concern himself with such matter. He gave a small nod before heading towards the circular gateway. Wait a sec, you aren't planning to run this dungeon alone, are you? As Isroth walked past Wes, he couldn't help but ask him that question. That's the plan. Isroth stopped walking and turned his head a bit to the side to look back towards Wes. Wes shook his head, you won't be able to complete the dungeon alone. Of course, I'm not questioning your strength, it's just that. Wes seemed a bit hesitant to speak. This was something people would normally have to find out by experiencing it firsthand. Guilds like Crosshaven and many others sold information or traded it something of equal value. It wasn't typically given away for free, but he decided to make an exception this time, as Ewan probably would not have minded. Oh. In fact, the first thing Isroth thought was that Wes was questioning his skill. Once you progress about halfway into the dungeon, you'll understand why I said those words to you. Though I will give you a tip, just remember that a trident has 3 points. Hopefully, he would understand such a clue, as the rest was solely up to him. Wes, however, knew that Isroth would be unable to complete this dungeon alone even with this extra bit of information. Isroth furrowed his brows, a trident has 3 points. Wasn't that pretty common knowledge? I'll remember. I will be taking my leave now. Isroth jumped into the circular gateway as a brilliant light flashed, illuminating all of the surrounding areas. Lieutenant, why did you let him enter inside? One of the players who were in a party with Wes asked out of curiosity. His player name was Toxic Epiphany, and he'd been with Wes long enough to know that he wanted to have a battle with the player who just passed by. It was unlike him to not fight when he felt like doing so. Wes felt even more depressed after that player spoke, being reminded of missing a perfect opportunity to fight. Noticing Wes' mood take a downturn, one of the players, Camellia, tried to cheer him up. It's okay, Lieutenant, I'm sure we'll run into him again in the future and you'll have a chance to fight until your heart's content. Camellia, you're such an angel. Wes used the crying emote to make his character manually cry, and he hugged Camellia. There, Lieutenant, Camellia said as she pats his head as if he was her adorable little brother. She gave a lovely smile as she did so, and the others all shook their head inwardly. They all were used to this behavior when their lieutenant did not get to have his way. Toxic Epiphany let out a sigh as he shook his head, if you keep spoiling him he's going to keep being all pouty. Just let him wallow for a bit, he'll shake it off. Eventually. Ack. Cruel. You're so cruel, Toxic. Come on, let's fight. Let's fight. Wes angrily flailed his arms at Toxic Epiphany. I'll gladly go a few rounds with you, Lieutenant. Toxic Epiphany placed his hand on the hilt of the sword at his waist. Now you two. Camellia smiled helplessly as she tried to calm both sides down. The 6 players who were guarding the gateway were all dumbfounded. Was this the same fierce Godspeed Wes who was known for his love of fighting? When Isroth first entered into the circular gateway, a bright light shone as if he was floating in midair. However, it also felt as though he was jumping across space itself to arrive at his destination. This almost reminds me of the teleportation arrays back in the Seven Realms. Though these lights are peculiar. When Isroth examines the light closer, he came to discover that it was not produced by a single source. There were tiny light particles of light drifting around throughout the atmosphere. They were difficult to spot if one was not already aware of their existence. However, since Isroth was at the second stage of the heavenly golden body physique and taking the 5 cycles pill, Isroth's senses were definitely the best within RML at this moment. The whole trip only lasted a few seconds. When the bright light vanished, Isroth's environment went through drastic changes. He was no longer standing in a pile of ruins like when he first slid into the swirling sands. System alert. You have entered the dungeon. Sea Palace Graveyard. There was a beautiful scene that unfolded before Isroth. Crystal clear water was falling down from the sky above. You could not see where the waterfall began as it seemed to stretch upward endlessly towards the firmament. Various species of plants were growing from out of the ground, most of which took on unique shapes. There were some plants that resembled an hourglass and was dark blue in color. Another plant was dark green in color with white spots and looked more like a sculpture than a plant. There were no suns or moons in the sky above, but there was a massive magical symbol that stretched across the sky, all the way to what was probably the very edge of this place. I suppose I should not get too used to a scenery. Though what's really strange is that this place looks nothing like a graveyard. Less than 15 minutes passed and Isroth already went through 3 different kinds of sceneries. To be honest, he was expecting undead creatures and a gloomy atmosphere, not one so rich of life. Isroth took a brief moment to study his surroundings, and it wasn't too long until something caught his eye. He walked a few steps forward and pushed one of the strangely shaped plants aside. What he found was a small statue around 90 centimeters tall made of material similar to the decayed stone-like object his foot knocked against when he first fell into the ruins. The statue was of a woman with the upper body of a human and the lower body of a fish holding onto a trident. She was a mermaid. There were 3 words written below the statue. It was most likely the name of the mermaid, but it was not in any language that Isroth had come across before. I wonder if it's one of the goddesses of this world like Helelatia. Isroth did not think about it too long and continued on his way forward. The further Isroth ventured into the dungeon, the more large bodies of water began to appear around him. There was always a clear path forward, however, it was becoming increasingly narrow. Now, there was barely enough room for 3 people to walk side by side in a comfortable manner. When Isroth stepped onto a path surrounded by one of the large bodies of water, he immediately unsheathed his blade of lightning and became vigilant. He stared down into the water and in the distance as a small dot began swimming towards him at a fast speed. As the dot grew closer to the surface of the water, Isroth managed to make out the appearance of the creature rushing at him with so much hostile intent. It's a merman. A few moments later, a creature with the upper body of a human male and the lower body of a fish broke through the surface of the water. The merman flew over Isroth's head and within his hands was a bronze trident. With the trident, he swung directly at Isroth aiming to knock him off the path he was on. Surface Dweller. You dare to taint the Holy Sea Palace. The merman sounded furious, his rage made it appear as if Isroth was his mortal enemy. Isroth, however, was already prepared for this and evaded the incoming trident strike. The 5 cycles pill was truly worthy of being a spirit rank pill that was infinitely close to being of the earth rank. Isroth could see and hear every single move of the merman and used his blade of lightning to launch a swift counter-attack as it flew over his head, slicing the tip of his sword right across the merman's torso. 220 The merman fell back into the water, but Isroth managed to get a clear look at its information before it managed to do so. He could still feel it lingering around beneath him, ready to strike again. Name: Sea Palace Guard, normal, level. 18 HP 3 780/4000 ATK. 350 def. 50. AGI. 200 MAG 0 skills. Underwater speed, passive. While underwater, this creature has their speed increased by 50%. Water pulse, active. Using its innate gift of water control, this creature propels itself out of the water and launches a strike using its trident, dealing 150% of its attack as damage to the target. Aqua wave, active. Swings its trident upward while within the water, causing a wave of water to crash against its target violently, dealing 200% of its attack as damage and stunning the target for 2 seconds. Chapter 64 Sea Palace Graveyard. You are listening at novelfull.audio. It's fast. Though it's only fastest than me while it's inside the water, its movements are a bit wild, but manageable nonetheless. Its HP is pretty low for a level 18 monster, but it makes up for it with its high ATK and AGI. Isroth remained vigilant as the Sea Palace Guard swam underneath him. There. Isroth swung his Blade of Lightning in a 180-degree arc, striking out behind him. Just as he did so, the Sea Palace Guard leaped out of the water and started to run straight into Isroth's sword. However, at the very last moment, the Sea Palace Guard slapped its fish-like tail against the surface of the water, shifting his position as it propelled his body in a different angle, avoiding the blade aimed at him. Isroth smirked as he suddenly twisted his entire body, spinning around and striking outward with his right index finger, with energy converging at Isroth's fingertip. While the body of the Sea Palace Guard changed its direction to move closer to the left and successfully evaded Isroth's sword strike, Isroth's fingertip drilled into the Sea Palace Guard. The Sea Palace Guards was brought to an abrupt halt for a split second, as its body was hit by the Fishing Point skill. Point 250. Isroth acted quickly as his leg shot at like a vicious snake ready to sink its fangs into its prey. Using the skill Serpent's Bite, Isroth's foot smashed into the torso area of the Sea Palace Guard without mercy. 153 damage, battle alert. Player Isroth has stunned Sea Palace Guard. The body of the Sea Palace Guard slammed onto the narrow earth path that Isroth stood on. There was a brief window of opportunity to whittle away the creature's HP. Isroth's Blade of Lightning released an oppressive aura as light energy formed on its edge. He executed a well-timed first baneful sword. Destruction, aiming at the dead center of the Sea Palace Guard neck. Critical hit. 1,840 damage. Isroth did not end his assault there and continued on as he swung his Blade of Lightning once again, except this time trailing behind it was a shadow that was almost like an exact copy of Isroth's Blade of Lightning. Each struck twice in rapid succession, hitting the head and neck of the Sea Palace Guard while it was still in a stunned state. He was a bit disappointed that the fear effect did not go off when he used first baneful sword. Destruction, but at this rate, it would not make much of a difference. Critical hit. For 90 damage, Phantom Strike, critical hit. 760 damage, Phantom Strike. In only a few moments, Isroth had already taken away over 90% of the Sea Palace Guard total HP. Battle alert. Sea Palace Guard is no longer stunned. The Sea Palace Guard was finally able to move once again, as the first thing it tried to do was make its way back into the water. However, how could Isroth let it escape from his sights when it was already so close for it to be defeated? Besides, what if it fell into the water when he killed it? Would he still receive any loot, or would he have to dive into the water just to collect it? It was a question he'd rather not have to go through the trouble of figuring out the answer to. Surface Dweller. The demise of your world shall come soon, when my brethren. The Sea Palace Guard was yelling out while attempting to jump back into the water to escape. However, just as it was about to jump into the water, a blue trail of light flashed across the back of his neck. It was Isroth's Blade of Lightning. Critical hit. For 90 damage, the Sea Palace Guard HP reached 0 and it flailed around a bit on the pathway before it stopped moving. It was completely lifeless. System alert. Congratulations, you have defeated Sea Palace Guard System Alert. You have been awarded 2880 EXP System Alert. The effect of the skilled equalizer has been activated. System Alert. The timer for the skilled equalizer has started. 59 minutes 59 seconds remaining. System Alert. You have been awarded 2880 EXP from the skill equalizer. Loot drop. 1 silver and 65 bronze coins. X1 Merfolk scale. Isroth's eyes shone briefly when he saw the amount of EXP he received from just one monster alone. That was over 5,000 EXP. It was mainly because he received bonus EXP due to the level gap between him and the Sea Palace Guard, and so when that acted together with the equalizer skill, it provided an abundant amount of EXP. I have to push this skill to its limits. He was referring to the equalizer skill, as every second of this skill was precious. Isroth did not bother even glancing at the Merfolk scale and simply placed it within his inventory along with the coins. Isroth dashed forward on the pathway, and as he did so, feeling out the presence of 3 more creatures as their focus was locked onto him from underneath the water. He stopped sprinting and concentrated on the exact positions of these creatures. All 3 of them were Sea Palace guards as they leaped out of the water with their tridents locked onto Isroth. "We shall avenge our brother," one of the Sea Palace guards cried out. Isroth stood still waiting for the right moment. As soon as all 3 of the Sea Palace Guard were within a range of 3 meters, Isroth's palm shot out. Hundreds of illusions of Isroth's palm formed descended unto the 3 Sea Palace Guards like it was like an endless barrage. Of course, hidden inside of these hundreds of palms was only one true strike. The myriad elusive palms was one of Isroth's most useful skill when facing multiple opponents at once. Each strike was aimed at a vital point of the Sea Palace Guard. The head, neck, and the gills of life forms for those that lived in the sea were the obvious vital points for the Sea Palace Guard. System Alert. You have reached 10 stacks of Lightning Charge. The skill Lightning Field is now available for use. This was the skill Isroth was waiting for ever since he received the Blade of Lightning. He wanted to test out the power of the Lightning Field skill. After all, it was important to have a full understanding of your own strength. During his fight against the first Sea Palace Guard, Isroth used 7 attacks in total to take it down. When he used the skill Phantom Strike earlier, he realized that instead of gaining a single stack of Lightning Charge, he received 2 stacks instead. If that was the case, then with a skill like Myriad Elusive Palms, as long as he was facing multiple enemies, he would be able to stack 10 Lightning Charge without much of a problem. Critical hit. For 90 damage, Myriad Elusive Palms. Immediately after Isroth's Myriad Elusive Palms finished its 3rd strike, a pulse of lightning was released from the current location Isroth was standing at. BZZZZT, BZZZZZT. In an instant, a field of lightning spread out 15 meters around Isroth. There were purple bolts of lightning striking down as if there was an invisible sphere around Isroth and the 3 Sea Palace Guards. Battle Alert. You have activated the skill Lightning Field. Battle Alert. Your ATK and AGI has been increased by 50%. Battle Alert. Your attacks now deal 20% bonus damage as lightning damage. Battle Alert. Sea Palace Guard has been paralyzed for 0.25 seconds by player Isroth's Lightning Field. Isroth's luck was quite good with the first strike of lightning as it managed to successfully paralyze all 3 of the Sea Palace Guard. Even though the paralyzed effect only lasted a mere 0.25 seconds, it was still plenty of time for Isroth to take advantage of in the middle of battle. With his attack now increased to 405 and agility increased to 315, these poor Sea Palace Guards did not stand a chance. I can sense everything perfectly while inside of the lightning field. It's almost like everything within the sphere of influence is in my control. Lightning crackled intensely around Isroth's Blade of Lightning, and it was giving off a low rumbling noise that resembled the sound of a thunderstorm. When Isroth slashed at the nearest Sea Palace guard with his sword, it hit the area near its ribcage where its gills were placed. BZZZZZT. Critical hit. 1,408 damage. Isroth hit for over 1,000 damage with a simple basic attack aimed at its vital point. Why was his damage so high? That was due to the lightning damage effect against the water-type creature, Sea Palace Guard. The entire body of the Sea Palace Guard was completely covered in water, so the effect was quite intense. Isroth's original basic attack damage of 405 was increased by 50%. Then, thanks to the bonus 20% damage from lightning damage and the critical hit, the amount of damage he dealt was insanely high. 10 seconds. That should be plenty of time. Every step that Isroth made, he left behind a small trail of lightning without a sound. But around 1 second later, a loud crashing sound echoed where Isroth just stood moments ago. Although his movements were simple, they were incredibly refined to a masterful level. The blade of lightning held within his hand was performing a deadly dance of death as every strike with his sword was aimed to deal as much damage as possible. BZZZZZT, BZZZZZT. Isroth took full advantage of the paralyzed effect and hit each Sea Palace Guard once. As the next second passed, Isroth was not as lucky as only one of the Sea Palace Guard were paralyzed from the effect of his lightning field. The other two Sea Palace Guard stabbed downward with their tridents, attacking Isroth from two different directions at the same time. There was not too much space to maneuver on this pathway that grew more narrow with every step. However, with the addition of the agility boost and the ability to read incoming attacks accurately, Isroth took half a step backward, evading one of the trident strikes as it smashed into the ground, causing a bit of rubble to shoot up. The other trident was speeding directly at his throat, was aiming to pierce one of Isroth's vital point. Isroth did not panic as he calmly stepped onto the trident that slammed into the ground just a moment ago. As the Sea Palace Guard lifted its trident upward, Isroth used the momentum to launch a few meters into the air. By doing so, Isroth dodged the second trident locked onto him. He stayed in the air for less than a second before landing back down onto the pathway. As he did so, the lightning field unleashed another barrage of lightning bolts that struck all three of the Sea Palace Guard once again. Even if the Sea Palace Guard were moving inside of the water, they would still be unable to keep up with Isroth's current speed. However, they did not even get the chance to return to the water after they began their assault on him because of the lightning field constantly interrupting their movements. It wasn't long until Isroth finished off the three Sea Palace Guards, with a few seconds remaining on his lightning field skill. It had taken him less than 10 seconds to deal with three creatures that were 2 levels above his own. This skill is really useful. The field of lightning surrounding Isroth slowly vanished as the crackling sound released from his blade of lightning died down. As the corpse of the three Sea Palace Guard laid motionless on the pathway, Isroth received a string of system alerts. Chapter 65 Great Kashish Sea, the underwater world. You are listening at novelfull.audio. System alert. Congratulations, you have defeated Sea Palace Guard. System alert. You have been awarded 2,880 EXP. System alert. You have been awarded 2,880 EXP from the Skill Equalizer. System alert. Isroth earned a total of 17,280 EXP from the three Sea Palace Guards. He leveled up one time and was not too far off from leveling up again. He also received 4 silver and 95 bronze coins. The other loot that dropped were 5 additional merfolk scales, which gave Isroth 6 in total. As Isroth continued on the pathway, it became so narrow that only one person would be able to walk on the path. Which means that if an entire party was walking on this pathway, they would have to do so in a straight line. Though for some reason, there were no longer any Sea Palace Guards coming towards him. Strange. Why did they all suddenly stop swimming up here? As Isroth took one more step forward, his foot felt as if it were sinking into a body of water. He immediately halted his steps and moved his foot back a full step. His first thought was that he stepped into the body of water by accident, however, with the control he had over his body such a mistake is highly unlikely. Isroth reached his hand out and touched the air before him. As he did so, his hand sunk into the space in front of him. The feeling was the same as his foot from earlier, and it felt as though his hand was sinking into a body of water. It's similar to the time I entered into the Lake of Tears, except it feels more like water instead of lead. Isroth stepped forward, moving his entire body into the area in front of him. When he arrived at the other side, it was not like traveling through a layer of space. Instead, it was similar to jumping into a lake or river, and when you reached the bottom you would not touch the bottom surface. It was as if when you were about to reach the bottom the world around you would be flipped upside down, and before you knew it, you were back at the surface. System alert. You have entered the region, Great Kashish Sea. When Isroth entered into the Great Kashish Sea, he was surprisingly standing atop a vast sea, walking on the water as if it were solid ground. There was no end in sight, no matter which direction Isroth looked in. How unusual. Isroth glanced down at his feet and observed the constant movement of the water. There were numerous unique structures underneath the water that was filled with a great variety of different colors. It resembled a magnificent coral reef with many species of small fish swimming around all throughout it. There were signs of civilization everywhere within the coral reef. Small structures that appeared to be naturally shaped by the sea itself were spread out within the coral reef. These small structures were the equivalent of village huts. Although Isroth could not see what was on the inside of them due to their ceiling-like constructs, he would occasionally see creatures swimming in and out of the structures. Isroth took a few steps forward, and soon enough, a net-like barrier appeared before him. This meant that Isroth had run into the zone boundary and could not travel any further. Do I just dive down? Isroth tapped his foot against the surface of the water, however, nothing happened. His body would not sink into the sea no matter how much force he exerted. While there were multiple pathways when he first entered into the Sea Palace graveyard, they all ultimately converged at the same point. So no matter what path someone chose, in the end, that person would end up on the same narrow pathway that Isroth traveled on to get here. Isroth did not believe that the game would have this area here for no reason, and so there must have been something he was missing. He then remembered the item he received from eliminating the Sea Palace guards earlier, the Merfolk Scale. Isroth had not checked the benefits the item provided since he wanted to focus on leveling up and would sort out the loot later. However, now was a better time than any, as it may be the key to continuing onward. Isroth removed one of the Merfolk Scales from his inventory and examined it. Name: Merfolk Scale, Reagent, Rank: None. Usage: a single scale belonging to a merfolk that releases a fishy-smelling special chemical when heated to a high temperature. The effects of this special chemical are unknown, but it is thought to give the user a stronger affinity with water-based techniques. This scale can also be placed, in its natural state, on one's skin to grant them the ability to enter the underwater world and breathe freely underwater until they exit from the underwater world. It seems I should at least spare a glance at the items I receive from now on. Isroth set the Merfolk Scale onto his left hand. The moment he did that, Isroth's body began to sink slowly into the sea beneath him. In less than 5 seconds, Isroth's body was completely submerged underneath the water's surface. He was now in an entirely different world from the one outside the Sea Palace graveyard. Strangely enough, his actions did not feel at all impeded by the water. While it took a bit of getting used to, the movement felt fairly simple and would not give players who did not know how to swim a hard time. This may have been due to the system making it easier for players to adjust to being within this type of environment. The closest area to Isroth was the coral reef he spotted from above. Isroth started swimming in its direction, and the closer he moved to the reef, the more clearly he was able to perceive creatures located there. There were a few that resembled the Sea Palace guards from earlier, however, they appeared harmless and held on to no weapons. There were also multiple fish-type monsters swimming back and forth. They were at least 6 meters long and possessed a similar build to a great white shark. One major difference was that their skin was deep blue in color with yellow markings placed in certain areas. Their razor-sharp teeth were being clearly displayed like a warning sign to prevent anyone or anything from approaching too close. Their beady-looking eyes were red in color, and those razor-sharp fins attached to the side of their bodies looked as if it could cut through solid stone. Name: Yellow, Razored Krko Shark, Elite, Level 20 HP, 10,000, 100%. Isroth understood that eventually, he would come across this situation. Once monsters reached level 20, all their stats with the exception of HP and skills would no longer show up for the player. This was because the system stopped holding the player's hand around this point in time. This was common knowledge that players were capable of discovering in any beginner's guide online released by beta testers. Isroth was venturing into the unknown, and therefore, he decided now was a perfect time to use the stat points and skill points he'd been saving thus far. At the moment, Isroth had a total of 12 stat points and 4 skill points that were just sitting there unused. This early into the game, stat points were extremely important in how they were divided, and so players had to be careful of using them incorrectly. For example, even though Halls was a tank, he put too many stat points into his defensive stats and could barely deal any damage. However, Mick, who Isroth met back in Opal Town, put too many stat points into his attack stat and lacked a proper defense. It was important to find a certain balance this early on, as it affected how efficient you would be in leveling up and advancing faster into the game. Isroth was confident in his ability to accurately read the moves of his opponents. Therefore, he was not too worried about his defensive stat and would let the equipment he obtained cover that part for him. The main reason he invested more points into his HP was due to certain skills that may be unavoidable, such as most sound-based skills. There were also times where he would have to deal with skills similar to that enraged instant cast firestorm ability he ran into against the final boss of the Dungeon Goblin's Paradise. Isroth already knew what kind of combat style suited him. It was one with accurate, fast and deadly blows that would eradicate his target before they could even register what hit them. Power and speed. Isroth put 2 points into his HP, 5 points into his attack, and the last remaining 5 points into his agility. With his skill points, Isroth placed 1 point into the skill First Baneful Sword. Destruction, maxing out its level at long last. Skill name: First Baneful Sword. Destruction skill creator. Isroth skill level: maxed skill rank A active. Deals 400% of user attack as damage. Has a very high chance of causing the fear effect in those it targets. Description: a sword filled with a concentrated amount of destruction. Beware. A single strike of this sword technique can destroy those who stand in its way. This strike is not its full potential. Special effect: this skill can be used without a sword. If this skill kills its target, the cooldown on this skill will be reset. Cooldown: 1 minute 30 seconds. The first difference Isroth noticed was the fact that he could now use First Baneful Sword. Destruction without a sword and not have to pay the price of having its damage reduced. I wonder. Isroth had an interesting theory that he would definitely test at some point during this dungeon run. After thinking it over for a bit, Isroth decided to invest 2 skill points in the skill Phantom Strike. Even though it was only a B. ranked skill, it was a move Isroth used quite often when it was available. Another reason was that the S. ranked skills that he learned did not accept skill points. Instead, the skills required Isroth to use them in battle in order to increase their levels. Skill name: Phantom Strike skill creator. Isroth skill level: maxed skill rank B active. A 3-strike sword skill that deals 50% of the user attack as damage on the first strike and 100% of the user attack as damage on the second strike, and 150% of the user attack as damage on the third strike. B-No-L.M. Description: 2 swords closely follows the other, like a phantom striking unexpectedly. If you try to follow this sword with your eyes, you may be able to avoid the first strike, but the second and third will not miss. Cooldown. 1 minute. Although the cooldown on the skill remained the same, Isroth gained an additional sword strikes. This would assist in him stacking lightning charges quicker in single opponent battles. When Isroth finished spending his points, he then turned his attention to the nearest yellow, razored Kurko shark and started swimming towards it. If it's anything like the Sea Palace Guard, then it should have its agility increased by a certain amount while inside a body of water. If that's the case, I can expect for its speed to most likely exceed mine while I'm within this underwater world. When Isroth was about 18 meters away from the yellow, razored Kurko shark, its menacing red eyes locked onto him. With a great burst of speed, it shot directly at Isroth like an arrow, leaving its string with its blade-like fin seemingly ready to cut through anything that it touched. Its speed was definitely greater than that of the Sea Palace Guard. Isroth unsheathed his blade of lightning and decided to parry the incoming blade-like fin. He wanted to have a good grasp on how powerful the attack of this monster was, and with his HP, he was unafraid of dying so quickly. Parried. 258. He was knocked back slightly from the impact of the yellow, razored Kurko shark's attack. It has an attack of at least 500. I suppose it's only natural for a level 20 elite monster. Now that Isroth had a general idea of its attack power, he would not take damage again so easily. Chapter 66 Isolated Water Dropple. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Even with Isroth successfully parrying the blow, with his current defense stat of 95 and the 15% physical damage reduction from the passive skill Blessing of Helolatia, he still received almost 300 damage from one attack. Isroth managed to quickly slash out with his blade of lightning, attacking with a strike that hit just below the dorsal fin of the yellow, razored Kurko shark. 220 Sadly, his blade of lightning did not deal bonus lightning damage due to the skill lightning field not being activated. However, he did succeed in shaving off a little more than 2% of its total HP with that one attack. Even though it has 10,000 HP, its defense is not all that impressive. After the yellow, razored Kurko shark knocked Isroth back, it did not pursue him. Instead, it opened its enormous maw and the water surrounding the monster seemed to be compressing into a spherical form. Isroth would not wait to find out what this attack was and immediately executed an evasive maneuver. He swiftly swam down at the angle to position himself below the yellow, razored Kurko shark's body. Isroth paid close attention to the monster's gaping maw, and when he saw that the water had stopped being compressed, he instantly accelerated downward in a vertical line. In less than half a second later, a compressed sphere of pressurized water shot out at Isroth like a cannonball. Its speed was incredibly fast, and this was definitely not an attack he wanted to meet head-on. Although Isroth accelerated just as the yellow, razored Kurko shark completed its skill, the attack still locked onto Isroth as if it already knew he would try to avoid it. Isroth remained calm, and just as the compressed sphere of pressurized water was about to crash into him, he dived down behind one of the corals. The attack crashed into the solid coral, destroying a great deal of it in the process. Even if you have an advantage in water, let's see how I'll deal with you, little fish. Although this creature was several times larger than Isroth, compared to some of those sea creatures in the Seven Realms who were the size of a small world, it was just a little fish. The yellow, razored Kurko shark eyes turned beastly as it swam downward towards the coral reef where Isroth was located. Isroth decided it was the best course of action to fight in a more restrained and enclosed environment. Fighting in the open sea against a creature with nearly twice his own speed would just be making matters more difficult for himself. The coral reef was filled with a multitude of corals, rocks, and a seaweed-type plant. This type of area would severely limit the movements of the yellow, razored Kurko shark with its huge body. For Isroth, however, it was an ideal battleground. As the sea creature neared the coral reef, its speed noticeably decreased as if it were attempting to avoid crashing senselessly into the various objects. By the time it arrived inside of the coral reef and moved closer to Isroth, its speed was reduced by more than 30% of its initial amount. The yellow, razored Kurko shark was about to chomp down on Isroth, but when it snapped its jaws closed there was no resistance whatsoever. Even though the sea creature was still a bit faster than him, Isroth evaded its bite with relative ease. Of course, if he were to use flickering steps then it would be simply impossible for it to touch him at all. However, there were too many unknown factors about this place and so, it was more reasonable to save its usage until it was actually required. As Isroth dodged to the left side, he quickly slashed out with his blade of lightning, leaving behind a light purple trail in the process. This strike was targeted at the gills of the yellow, razored Kurko shark located not too far away from its pectoral blade-like fin. Though this was not just a regular attack. Isrotha's sword had two faint shadows following every movement it made. This was the improved phantom strike that Isroth had just achieved the maximum level with. The yellow, razored Kurko shark was able to prevent its gills from being struck with the first strike. However, it was powerless to stop the next two strikes from slicing into its gills, even though it was sure it successfully protected its vital point .60 critical hit, .540 critical hit, .860 just as Isrotha's phantom strike hit with its third strike. The yellow, razored Kurko shark lashed out at him in a furious way, spinning its body around rapidly to use its sharp caudal fin to attack Isroth. It just received an extensive amount of damage and its precious gills were nearly completely butchered by Isroth and so it was only natural that it would be angered. Isroth reacted swiftly, repositioning himself slightly so that a sturdy coral blocked the path between his body and the yellow, razored Kurko shark's sharp caudal fin. The yellow, razored Kurko shark's caudal fin pulverized the coral, however, it lost all its power when it did and there was none left to even remotely damage Isroth. With his strategy of using the corals and rocks as a way to deter the sea creature's assault, Isroth launched a counter-attack at every available opportunity, causing the yellow, razored Kurko shark's HP to decrease rapidly. 80%. 63%. 41%. 24%. When the yellow, razored Kurko shark's HP reached 24%, Isrotha's blade of lightning released an oppressive aura as it streaked in the sea in a dominating fashion. As Isrotha's sword was closing in on the sea creature, its movements began to become chaotic as if it were scared of something. This was due to the feared effect from the first baneful sword destruction that Isroth was currently targeting the sea creature with. Isrotha's blade of lightning sliced cleaning across the body of the yellow, razored Kurko shark, starting from its eye, over its gills, and all the way down to its caudal fin. Critical hit .2 for 60. That final strike was enough to bring the sea creature's HP all the way down to 0. Battle alert. The cooldown time for your skill first baneful sword destruction has been reset. System alert. Congratulations, you have defeated yellow, razored Kurko shark. System alert. You have been awarded 5,400 EXP. System alert. You have been awarded 5,400 EXP from the skill equalizer. System alert. You have leveled up to level 18. System alert. You have been awarded +3 stat points for leveling up. Loot drop .1 silver and 75 bronze coins. X1 yellow, razored Kurko shark fin. Isroth was inside of this dungeon for less than 10 minutes and he already leveled up twice in such a short period of time. Of course, this was due mainly to him having the equalizer skill in effect and soloing a dungeon meant for multiple players working together to conquer it. The amount of coins received does not go up by much at all. A level 20 elite monster gave such a small amount of coins. Though Isroth figured this was how the system made it so that the majority of players would have no choice but to earn coins through other various means. As he picked up the yellow, razored Kurko shark fin, Isroth checked its usage before sitting it inside of his inventory. Name. Yellow, razored Kurko shark fin, reagent, rank. None usage. While most of the fins located on the yellow, razored Kurko shark are all incredibly sharp and dangerous, its dorsal fin is very soft and harmless. It releases a strong fishy smell when heated and causes those caught unprepared to enter into a bestial state when it is inhaled. Its effect and inhaled reminds me of the main ingredient for a certain pill recipe. I'll have to do a bit of research when I have some free time. Isroth swam up a few meters and not too far in the distance patrolling different sections above the coral reef were 3 yellow razored Kurko sharks. When Isroth was preparing to head over to the nearest one of the sea creatures, something shiny was glistening on the sea floor, hidden away by the seaweed-like plants. Isn't that? Isroth went down into the field of seaweed-like plants and found a pleasant surprise waiting for him. At first, he was unsure if it really was that item because it was much bigger than the one he used during the apothecary aptitude test. It really is an isolated water droplet. Isroth reached down and picked up the shiny crystallized-shaped marble water droplet. System alert. You have received X5 isolated water droplet, so 5 droplets are condensed into a single item. The one used for the apothecary aptitude test must have been separated individually by one of the apothecaries there. These droplets are not rare by any means. It simply blends in with the environment so naturally that unless someone is intentionally searching for one, it would otherwise be challenging to find. Isroth searched the surrounding area thoroughly and managed to collect a grand total of 75 isolated water droplets. With this, I'll be able to craft the 5 cycles pill and still have some left over to run some experiments. After gathering all of the isolated water droplets in sight, Isroth swam towards the nearest yellow, razored Kurko shark. Isroth spent a total of 10 minutes collecting the isolate water droplets and clearing the remaining 3 yellow, razored Kurko sharks. He used the same exact tactics as he did against the first yellow, razored Kurko shark he fought. Thanks to his first baneful sword destruction skill, as long as he lowered the HP of the sea creatures down to 24% and struck one of its vital points, the cooldown on his first baneful sword destruction would reset. This reduced the total amount of time needed to eliminate the sea creatures. Isroth received a total of 32,400 EXP. He wished that the equalizer skill would become permanent. Though he understood that the system would never allow such an unfair advantage as a permanent 100% EXP boost. He was also awarded 5 silver and 25 bronze coins, as well as 2 additional yellow, razored Kurko shark fins. Sadly, the sea creatures did not drop anything that valuable. Isroth stared into the distance and was unable to see the end of the coral reef. However, he soon noticed a beautiful colossal coral that appeared as if it was molded by an artist. At the top of that colossal coral was a small statue of an intimidating-looking merman riding atop a noble and majestic seahorse-type sea creature. This merman, however, had actual legs covered with scales. He swam through the coral reef and the only sea life he ran into were the different species of small harmless fish. Isroth arrived in front of the arc-shaped colossal coral and swam through it. System alert. You have entered the region Calder's Reef. The scenery did not change that much as his view was still filled with countless corals, rocks and plants. However, in the distance was a grand structure made entirely out of rainbow-colored corals. The corals were emitting a majestic aura as if this sea was not fit to host its presence. Isroth observed the grand structure for a moment before swimming in its direction. The entire area surrounding the grand structure had bright yellow-colored sand covering the whole sea floor. It was most likely due to the majestic aura of the rainbow-colored corals that the grand appeared so enriched compared to the neighboring sand. At the bottom of the grand structure was a hole big for all 4 of those yellow, razored Kurko sharks from earlier to swim through together without touching one another. Isroth swam into the hole and when he arrived on the inside, there were corals emitting a luminescent light blue glow. When Isroth moved closer to the coral, the water around it felt warm and comfortable. There were numerous holes spread all throughout the inside of the rainbow-colored coral and there seemed to be no clear path. However, Isroth could sense multiple presences swimming around him. Isroth remained vigilant and swam upward into one of the openings. Chapter 67 Calder, the Seahorse. Now you are listening at novelfull.audio. The area within the rainbow-colored reef was very spacious once inside, despite their average-sized outward appearance. Different color lights matching that of a rainbow were continually flowing within the walls like a pulsating heartbeat. It was as if the rainbow-colored coral itself was alive. When Isroth entered into the opening that was above him, he spotted 3 tiny fish just up ahead. They were no bigger than the palm of his hand. The 3 tiny fish were floating not too far from the top of the tunnel-like construct and were swimming in a continuous circle. It was almost mesmerizing. Isroth furrowed his brows as he continued to swim upward in the direction of the 3 tiny fish. There was definitely something strange about this place. When he reached the top of the tunnel-like construct, the fish did not bother attacking him and just continued to swim in a circle. Name: Rainbow Coral Fish, Normal, Level 1 HP, 50/50ths ATK 10 Def 0 AGI 5. Even though these fish appeared to be harmless at first glance, it was better to be certain of it. Isroth cut through one of the rainbow coral fish and it instantly died. He did not receive any EXP or items from it, most likely due to the large level gap between him and the sea creature. The other 2 fish, even after seeing their companion be sliced in half, did not stop swimming in a circle. Isroth eliminated the other 2 rainbow coral fish and advanced onward. A few moments later, Isroth's head left the surface of the water and he was in a normal air-filled atmosphere. However, he was still inside of the rainbow-colored coral. He knew this because the effects of the merfolk scale were still present. Isroth leaped out of the water and landed safely onto the area just before a huge circular platform. He gazed up at the ceiling and found that he was actually inside of a giant bubble. However, there were numerous holes within the bubble, but it did not show any signs of popping. It was also strange how the water was unable to flow freely into this area. It was most likely due to magic. Standing at the far end of the huge circular platform was a man with well-defined muscles standing at least 2.5 meters tall. He had long blonde hair with streaks of gray running through it that stopped halfway down his back. Shiny rainbow-colored scales were covering his arms and legs. Sat upon the man's back was a golden trident. It gave off an aura that was many times stronger than the tridents the Sea Palace guards used. A silver chain was attached to the bottom of the golden trident and was curled around the entire right arm of the man. Isroth observed the man on the other side of the platform who resembled the statue of the man on top of the seahorse-like creature he viewed atop the arc-shaped coral. Name: Calder, the Seahorse Knight, Boss, Level 22 HP, 32,000, 100%. Isroth jumped up onto the platform and as soon as he did, Calder struck the area beneath himself with the bottom end of his golden trident. Surface Dweller, this is the domain of Kashish. After countless years of fighting an endless battle, I would have let you return to your surface world unharmed. However, I smell the blood of my brethren on your hands. For that, do not think of leaving this place with your life. The gigantic bubble began to shake violently and water began to slowly pour out of the various openings that lead into the bubble. Though, the amount was almost negligible compared to the size of the bubble. At the rate it was entering into the gigantic bubble, it would take hours to even fill it up halfway with water. Isroth already had his blade of lightning unsheathed and was prepared for the battle ahead of him. Even if Calder was willing to let him go if he hadn't killed his brethren, he would not let a boss monster slip away from his grasp. The silver chain wrapped around Calder's arm unraveled as he grabbed a hold of the golden trident placed upon his back. He then stretched right arm back in a throwing position as a light yellow-colored energy coated the golden trident. This was one attack Isroth would not try to test how much damage it dealt. He could not afford to be careless, especially with so many unknown variables present. He immediately started to dash in a diagonal angle, closing the distance between himself and Calder without running in a straight line towards him. Whoosh! After a full second passed, Calder hurled the golden trident at Isroth. It seemed as if the weapon was tearing through the air itself inside of the gigantic bubble as the light yellow energy was rotating around it. Fast. The golden trident resembled a bolt of lightning striking down from the sky above. However, it barely made any sound, only a very light whoosh noise that most players would be unable to detect. But, thanks to Isrotha's heightened senses, he picked up the quiet sound as soon as the golden trident left the hand of Calder. Isroth used that small window of opportunity to abruptly kick off his right foot and change his direction as he was dashing. Crash! The golden trident crashed into the platform where Isroth was just standing at not even half a second ago and created a small crater around the size of a bowl. While it may not seem that impressive or powerful to most, Isroth knew that the attack Calder just used was incredibly powerful. There was no way a boss monster would have such mediocre attack when the level of the yellow, razored Kurko shark he fought just moments ago had at least 500 attack. Lingering at the center of the small crater was a light yellow energy. It was a good decision not to try and parry that attack. The level of energy concentrated into it was not a small amount. The attack was so compressed together that if the bottom side of this platform was within sight, there would be a giant hole the size of at least a quarter of this large circular platform. Calder yanked on the chain that he was now holding in his left hand and the golden trident soared into the air heading in his general direction. However, Calder did not take the golden trident into his hand to toss again but instead, he grabbed a different part of his chain with his right hand and swung the golden trident around rapidly in circles using the chain. While Calder was swinging around the golden trident, it created a gust of strong wind. Whoosh! The golden trident pierced down from above, intending to run right through Isrotha's head cleanly. Isroth, however, had other plans as he once again used his keen hearing to determine where the golden trident would strike from and evaded the weapon as it came crashing down at him. Isroth sped in the direction of Calder and succeeded in closing the distance in between them. Calder pulled on the chain contacted to his golden trident and as it was returning to him, a sphere of pressurized water appeared in the palm of his hand. He slapped out at Isroth who was now within his melee attack range. Isroth shifted his body to the side, evading the pressurized water sphere. However, he noticed something strange about that water sphere. But before he could even think about it, he heard a muffled popping sound. Pop! Isroth instinctively moved his blade of lightning to the side of his body that was closest to the pressurized water sphere. Not too long after that action, that popping sound turned into an explosion. Boom! The pressurized water sphere exploded just as it passed by Isrotha's body. Luckily his reaction time was incredible and he actually managed to block part of the damage. Parried .383 Even with successfully parrying the blow and the 15% damage reduction provided by the passive skill Blessing of Helelatia, Isroth still took nearly 400 damage from one strike. A single attack had taken nearly 30% of his HP away. Interesting. The skills that Calder possessed were not displayed as his level was not below 20. However, so far Isroth had discovered 3 different skills and one of them was surely a passive type. Isroth remained calm even after losing nearly 30% of his HP and quickly struck out with his right leg like a strike wanting to sink its deadly fangs into its prey. Using the skill Serpent's Bite, Isroth kicked Calder on their right thigh and paralyzed him due to its effect, though the damage the skill dealt itself was not high by any means. 100 Although his attack barely scratched Calder, using Serpent's Bite accomplished Isrotha's main goal of temporarily keeping it in place. The golden trident seemed as if it possessed a will of its own and even though Calder was paralyzed, it still moved toward him. Isroth used this chance to dish out some major damage of his own. He went straight for the gills located near the lower area of Calder's ribcage with his blade of lightning and 2 shadows that looked like copies of it traveled right behind it. Critical hit, .180, critical hit, .500, critical hit, .820 Each of Isrotha's phantom strike slashes struck with amazing precision, scoring a critical hit with all 3 strikes. He did not stop his assault there as he continued hacking away at Calder. Back in the main palace located in Amaharp, there were 6 people gathered together in a room usually used for a war council sitting down at a round table. However, the situation this time was so dangerous that the 6 people here would rather deal with war rather than this potential disaster. If Isroth was there at the moment, he would immediately recognize 2 out of 6 of the individuals. One of them was Terminus, while the other person was surprisingly the old man Gear that Isroth had met back in Opal Town, who gifted him the skill flickering steps. Amongst the remaining 4 people were 2 women and 2 men. The whole room was filled with a gloomy atmosphere. There was not a single person within the room without a darkened expression on their face. It was so quiet that one would be able to hear a pin drop. The one who broke this silence and spoke first was Gear, trying to lighten the mood. "What's with all the long faces? We haven't seen in years, shouldn't this call for a grand celebration?" "Ha ha ha." Gear removed a flask from his jacket pocket and held it up as if he were toasting to everyone in the room before taking a drink. Terminus shook his head. "The situation this time is too serious to celebrate. Even with the Anaverities bell, there's still not a 100% chance of success. Given their current circumstances, it was hard for Terminus to stay optimistic." One of the women present spoke in a helpless voice. "Isn't that friend of yours a powerful seer for the goddess Helelatia? Can't she ask her for help directly?" Terminus let out a long sigh. "Impossible. A divine being will not intervene until the seal breaks completely. Though by the time that happened countless lives who have already been lost." The man who was sitting at the head of the table in the most luxurious chair looked as if he were in deep thought with his eyes closed. A few seconds later he opened them and a look of hope flashed in his eyes. "That's it." He abruptly stood up from his chair, which surprised everyone. "Everyone, that portal is opening up soon." The man had nearly forgotten due to the current events, but it was exactly what they needed right now. "However, we are unable to enter due to the power restrictions placed upon that realm. But we can still send people inside in our place." Gear, Terminus, and the other 3 individuals all looked at the man speaking in disbelief. Of course. Why didn't they think of that sooner? If the people they sent successfully reached the end of that place, then, along with the power of the Anaverities bell, their chances of success would increase by leaps and bounds. Yes. Yes, of course. But, who do we send? Terminus was the first to express his approval. The man who presented the idea stopped to think for a moment before finally coming to a decision. "Why don't we all choose at least one person to go in our place? Someone with a suitable amount of talent that will raise the overall chance of success." "You mean?" "Yes, it is the only way." The man spoke in a firm tone. There was only silence afterward, as if everyone was in deep thought. However, there was one person who was calmly drinking from out of his flask as if he had already decided. That person was Gear. Isroth had no clue about what was currently taking place in Amaharp inside the palace. Right now, his attention was focused completely on dealing with Calder. "I suppose now is as good a time as any to try that move." Chapter 68 Skill Fusion. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Isroth was currently moving at a high speed around Calder. At the moment, Isroth had yet to acquire the skills necessary for a long-range battle. Therefore, in order to avoid becoming simple target practice for Calder, Isroth stuck close to him and did not retreat in the slightest once he closed the distance. Isroth did not spend this time simply running in circles around Calder. Every opportunity that presented itself was not wasted, and Isroth made sure to attack whenever possible. His strategy so far was working perfectly, as Calder was incapable of landing a solid hit on him. "He's getting faster." Isroth realized that although Calder possessed a high attack stat, his agility stat seemed to be a little lacking in comparison. In fact, Calder's speed appeared to be slower than that of the Sea Palace guards Isroth fought when he first arrived inside the Sea Palace graveyard dungeon. Though Isroth linked this to Calder not being within a body of water and not a gigantic bubble. Hence, he did not receive the increase in agility as the Sea Palace guard or Yellow, Razored Kurko Shark did. However, as time passed by, Calder's agility was slowly improving. It was hard to notice such a change since it was happening at a steady pace. But eventually, even if a player did not have Isroth's heightened senses, it was only a matter of time until Calder's speed increase became obvious. There was another event going on at the same time that was the most suitable explanation as to why Calder was getting faster. The water level in this room is rising. The rate at which it's filling up the room has more than tripled since the beginning from when I first stepped onto the platform. Also, there's something else that has been bothering me. Although Isroth was pondering a few things, he did not let himself get distracted from the battle in front of him. Isroth swept his blade of lightning past the lower left ribcage of Calder, slashing at the location where his gills were located. Critical hit, .500 with that strike, Isroth dropped Calder's HP down to the 50% mark. When that happened, the water pouring out of the openings leading into the gigantic bubble began to gush out like an endless stream. There were also numerous rainbow coral fish floating around, though all of them just kept swimming in a circle without a care in the world. Calder's speed skyrocketed and Isroth could no longer remain so close to him, as his attacks were becoming more challenging to evade. If Isroth focused solely on avoiding the attacks, then it would not be much of an issue, but if he did that, then he would be unable to launch any counter-attacks. The battle would then be locked in a stalemate with both sides unable to come out victorious. Of course, Isroth could always use flickering steps or the lightning field skill from his blade of lightning to keep up, but something kept urging him to hold off on using them for now. Isroth could feel a deadly energy gathering around Calder. The golden trident in his hands was shaking violently as if something wanted to burst free from it. Isroth quickly fell back and created some distance between Calder and himself. It has been too long since I've last fought a battle in water. Surface dweller, you should feel honored. Calder brandished his mighty golden trident, sending a powerful wave of water in Isroth's direction. There was a light yellow energy glowing faintly in front of the wave, releasing a heavy aura. The usual strategy in this type of situation would be for the tank to limit the movements of Calder to limit the effects of his agility increase. Although running dungeons solo provides a bountiful amount of EXP, in the end, it's far from being practical and efficient. Though I suppose there is an upside to everything. Isroth was referring to the fact that the loot he found would belong solely to him. If he was in a party, then the isolated water droplets he uncovered earlier would have been split into equal parts amongst all the members. However, Isroth still believed that sooner rather than later, he would require a party. His reasons were simple. Isroth did not start things he would not finish. He wanted to become recognized as the #1 player in RML. If he wished to accomplish that goal, then he needed a way to achieve more recognition. How does one stand out in a world full of millions upon millions of players this early in RML? The answer was simple: dungeons. Not just discovering them and clearing them, but rather doing so in record time. Although Isroth was confident in his ability to clear a dungeon successfully, to do so in record time would be practically impossible due to skill cooldowns and various other factors. While he was more than capable of learning new skills, Isroth felt that learning too many high-ranked heavenly laws would cause the system to further delay the skill it was already currently processing, the Boundless Void Emperor Perfection. Originally the skill only needed a single day to finish, however, as Isroth began to learn additional skills, the time limit shot up to 30 days. While it may not be entirely because of him learning new skills, it could have an unknown influence. Therefore, Isroth made the decision to limit his creation of new skills for now. Or at the very least those that would be considered S-ranked or higher. He already took a huge risk when acquiring the second Baneful Sword. Kill. Isroth's main focus was still on the boss monster before him. He did not let his thoughts distract his fighting capabilities. I should feel honored. You either think too highly of yourself or too lowly of me. Isroth maintained that carefree expression on his face as if everything was in his control. Even though Calder's speed was constantly rising, with his heightened senses and countless years of battle experience, it did not take long for Isroth to figure out how to deal with whatever Calder threw at him. The water inside of the gigantic bubble was now up to Isrotha's mid-torso area. As the wave cutting through the water was heading in his direction, Isroth moved out of the way in time, successfully dodging the attack. However, something strange occurred as the wave continued to travel well past Isroth and struck the rainbow-colored coral directly. This caused the rainbow-colored coral inside the gigantic bubble to form cracks on its surface. The cracks began to grow larger and it appeared as if something was breaking free from within the rainbow-colored coral. "Come, my trusty steed. Follow me into a glorious battle once more," Calder shouted as the area where his attack hit the rainbow-colored coral had pieces falling down. It resembled shards of broken glass dropping to the ground. Isroth narrowed his eyes as he glanced over towards where Calder's attack landed. That attack was never meant for him, it was being aimed at the rainbow-colored coral behind him all along. CRRCK, Nii. So that turned out to be the case. The area of the rainbow-colored coral that was cracked completely broke apart and what emerged from it was a magnificent seahorse creature. It was deep midnight blue in color with rainbow-colored scales covering the front section of its body. The seahorse eyes were filled with boundless confidence and it looked down on other creatures that it felt was lesser than itself. The sole reason Calder had such a noble and powerful steed was that he saved its life when it was weak and no bigger than 2 centimeters. But now, this majestic seahorse was over 3 meters tall and did not look anything like its former weak self. This was a rainbow, Coral King seahorse, one of the few in existence within the Great Kashish Sea. The seahorse was not the only thing that came from within the rainbow-colored coral when it broke apart. Water spewed into the gigantic bubble in a seemingly endless stream and it was not long before the entire battlefield was underwater. The rainbow, Coral King seahorse charged over at a frightening speed to meet up with Calder before turning itself to Isrotha's direction. When it arrived near him, Calder hopped onto its back and held his golden trident outwards pointing it at Isroth. Calder charged forward on his rainbow, Coral King seahorse at an incredible speed. It was obvious that his agility had easily more than double that of Isrotha's. Riding atop his seahorse mount, Calder zoomed past Isroth and as he did, he stabbed his golden trident through him cleaning. Isrotha's body was run through with Calder's golden trident, however, his HP did not budge from its original spot. A split second later, Isrotha's body began to flicker and his body that was supposed to be stabbed into with a trident suddenly vanished. Whoosh! 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 Suddenly, throughout the entire battlegrounds, afterimages of Isroth flickered everywhere. He used flickering steps to evade Calder's golden trident strike. There was no problem dealing with Calder's speed alone, however, once he started using the rainbow, Coral King seahorse as a mount, Isroth had no choice but to use flickering steps. The sea creature was too fast for him to react in time, even if he could see the attack coming ahead of time, he currently did not possess the base agility to respond properly. Therefore, he was left with having to use flickering steps. Isrotha's agility of 235 shot up to 940, soaring past Calder's own agility. But Isroth did not stop there and a faint buzzing sound with low crackles mixed in could be heard coming from his blade of lightning. Bzzzzzzzt, bzzzzzzzt. The blade of lightning in Isrotha's hands began to emit a crackling sound as a field of lightning spread out within a 15 meters radius from Isrotha's current position. Purple bolts of lightning began striking down from the invisible spherical atmosphere formed by the lightning field skill. Battle alert. You have activated the skill Lightning Field. Battle alert. Your ATK and AGI has been increased by 50%. Battle alert. Your attacks now deal 20% bonus damage as lightning damage. When Isroth activated his lightning field skill, his agility went from 940 to 1410. At this level of agility, even with Calder riding the rainbow, Coral King seahorse, Calder was attacking nothing but Isrotha's afterimages. A bolt of lightning struck Calder and his mount, paralyzing them for 0.25 seconds, which with Isrotha's current agility, enabled him to swiftly arrive at Calder's side. A deadly and oppressive aura encompassed Isrotha's right index finger along with a sharp aura that seemed as if it wanted to cut through everything in its path. Energy began to converge at the tip of the same finger, though it was much calmer than that oppressive aura. System alert. You have perfectly executed 2 skills with high compatibility. System alert. Congratulations player Isroth, you have created a fusion attack. Please name the fusion attack. System alert. Please note, this skill will share a cooldown time with the skill First Baneful Sword. Destruction and will not be usable when it is on cooldown. This skill will also consume 60 energy. First Baneful Sword. Destruction point. Isroth quickly leaped into the air and his finger penetrated straight through Calder's neck. The power behind the attack was incredibly concentrated to a single point and was able to cut through all of Calder's defenses like a hot knife through butter. Along with the bonus lightning damage from his lightning field skill and Calder being a sea creature, with just one attack Isroth removed more than 17% of Calder's total HP. Critical hit .5704. If anyone saw such a high damage number coming from someone with Isrotha's level, they would be dumbfounded. The only players who would probably not be surprised by anything at this point were Luna and Hulz. A small smile formed on Isrotha's face. It's about time to finish this fight. Chapter 69 Sapphire Gem. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Isroth received some additional system alerts after learning the skill fusion technique. Right now, however, he wanted to end this fight against Calder and so set it aside for the moment. The time for his temporary passive skill equalizer was slowly ticking away. He had a bit less than 40 minutes remaining. Using the skill's lightning field and flickering steps together, Isroth had no trouble overcoming Calder and his rainbow, Coral King Seahorse's speed. Isrotha's luck with the paralyze effect from the lightning field skill was also quite good, successfully activating more often than not. Thanks to the bonus lightning damage dealt while within the lightning field, Isroth was chipping away at Calder's HP rapidly. While he only had 10 seconds to use lightning field, Isroth made full use of it. Along with the Hellfire Rampage skill from his Hellfire crafted Oblivion chest, Isrotha's speed was terrifying. Isroth originally lost the stats as he had to temporarily fall back earlier, however, it did not take him long to receive the maximum 100 agility given from Hellfire Rampage, the skill attached to his rare chest piece equipment. 28%. 22%. 15%. 10%. I have tried to give you a merciful death, Surface Dweller. However, you have dared to push me this far. Calder shouted as the seahorse he was riding on eyes turned bright red in rage. The golden trident in Calder's hands shook violently as it unleashed a very aggressive aura. Battle alert. Calder, the seahorse knight has entered an enraged state. When Calder's HP hit dropped to 10%, he went into an enraged state. During this state, Calder's agility, attack, and magic would gain a huge boost. Not only that, but he would also gain the skill Endless Rage, which would increase his attack by 5% every 1 second. This was something Isroth had already expected to happen, and so he was not at all caught off guard by it. He did not slow down or halt his assault and continued to skillfully evade Calder's attacks. Calder charged forward towards Isroth on the back of his seahorse mount with the golden trident in his hand still shaking violently. However, there was a large amount of destructive power hidden behind the incoming attack. Even though it looked incredibly unstable, it was actually perfectly executed. But, how could Isroth be hit by such an attack with his current level of monstrous agility and heightened senses? Even if Calder may be considered fast to the average player, compared to Isroth he might as well be standing perfectly still. Isrotha's body flickered, leaving behind an afterimage in his place as the sword in his hand seemed as if it was descending from above like a lightning strike. Bzzzzzzzt, crash. Isrotha's blade of lightning sliced through Calder's body multiple times. Isrotha's attack speed at the moment was frightening. He could perform a total of 5 attacks every 2 seconds. This attack speed could only be matched by a dagger-wielding class who typically attacked fast thanks to their small and light weapons. However, even if those type of classes could match Izroth's attack speed, the damage was a different story. The great Kashish shall avenge me. Surface Dweller, your end is near. As Izroth's final strike passed by Calder and his rainbow, Coral King Seahorse, Calder managed to speak a few words before ultimately collapsing in defeat. Izroth had overcome the first boss monster inside of the Sea Palace graveyard. System Alert. Congratulations, you have defeated Calder, the Seahorse Knight. System Alert. You have been awarded 18,127 EXP. System Alert. You have been awarded 18,127 EXP from the Skill Equalizer. System Alert. You have leveled up to level 19. System Alert. You have been awarded +3 skill points for leveling up. System Alert. You have been awarded +1 stat point for leveling up. Loot drop point 22 silver coins. X1 Sapphire Gem. X3 Merfolk Scale. 1 Damaged Sea Trident. 1 Kashish's Scale Chest. Izroth furrowed his brows as he browsed through the loot. From the look of things, the drops given by Calder were not all that great. But, that was just because Izroth already had a rare chest piece and weapon. If not, then the loot could actually be considered pretty decent. At least that's what Izroth thought until he looked at the effects of the Kashish's Scale Chest. Name. Damaged Sea Trident, Uncommon, Level 22. Requirements. 230 Attack ATK. 100 Name. Kashish's Scale Chest, Uncommon, Level 22. Type. Plate Requirements. 130 Defense HP. 600 DEF. 50 Set Effect. 2. The user is able to travel freely inside the underwater world without the use of a Merfolk Scale. Set Effect. 3. Grants the user +50% bonus speed while within any body of water. Set Effect. 4. The user gains +30 ATK, +20 DEF. Set Effect. 5. The user gains +2000 HP, +50 DEF. Set Effect. 6. The user gains +4000 HP, +50 ATK, +50 DEF. Special note. This equipment piece is part of the Kashish Scale set and when equipped with other set pieces, grants the user extra benefits. The Kashish's Scale Chest was actually part of an equipment set series. By itself it was not that great, however, if used together with the other pieces of the Kashish Scale set, the benefits would be amazing. If any tank managed to receive all 6 pieces of the set, just from the set effects alone they would gain 6000 HP, 80 ATK, and 120 DEF. This was not including the stats provided by the item itself and was solely from the set effects. It's too bad that the requirements and armor type doesn't suit me. Izroth already had the Hellfire crafted Oblivion chest equipped which was more compatible with his high-speed playstyle. Kashish's Scale Chest, on the other hand, was more suited to a defensive playstyle. Izroth set the coins and items into his inventory. He would figure out what to do with them once he was outside of the Sea Palace graveyard. However, he left one item out of his inventory. It was the Sapphire Gem. Before examining the Sapphire Gem, Izroth checked back on the system alerts he received after using a skill fusion. System Alert. Congratulations player Izroth, you are the first player to perform a skill fusion. System Alert. You have been awarded +100 World Fame. System Alert. You have been awarded +3 Stat Points. System Alert. You have been awarded +1 Skill Point. System Alert. You have been awarded +1 gold coin. The rewards were actually not that bad. He could always use more stat points and skill points, but he still had yet to feel the benefits from having world fame. Though, Izroth understood that eventually, it would reveal its advantages. He then began to examine the Sapphire Gem he looted from Calder. Name. Sapphire Gem, Dungeon Item, Rank. None usage. This Sapphire Gem, when used together with its counterparts the Aquamarine Gem and Moonstone Gem, allows its possessor to pass through one of the deepest levels of the underwater world. Special note. By itself, this gem does not have any value or use. If this gem leaves the Sea Palace graveyard, it will be destroyed. So I still need to find the Aquamarine Gem and Moonstone Gem in order to travel to the deeper levels of the underwater world. Does that mean this dungeon has at least 2 more boss monsters? The Goblin's Paradise dungeon that Isroth cleared before only had 2 bosses. Though if you included the hidden boss then it would be a total of 3. Apparently, this dungeon also had a hidden boss to it, therefore, if he needed to defeat 2 more bosses then there were most likely 4 boss monsters total in this dungeon. Of course, this was only a theory Isroth came up with. The gems could very well be somewhere entirely different within the underwater world, not necessarily in the hands of a boss monster like Calder. Isroth set the Sapphire Gem into his inventory and as he did, the water started to drain out of the gigantic bubble. The area of the rainbow-colored coral that was destroyed by Calder's attack to summon his seahorse had repaired itself to its original undamaged state. When the water finished draining out of the gigantic bubble, the rainbow, coral fish that were swimming around in circles began to move in the same direction. There were over 100 of them, but all of them were in groups of 3. Isroth observed the rainbow, coral fish and saw that they were drifting downward. They were heading towards the bottom side of the platform near where Calder was initially standing when Isroth first arrived on the circular platform. Isroth walked over to the side of the circular platform and when he reached the edge, what he saw was a pathway resembling a slide with water running rapidly on the bottom of it. He made sure to check his surroundings when he first stepped onto the platform and this was not here before the fight. It must have opened after I defeated Calder. He slid down the waterslide-like structure with numerous twists and curves on the way downward. There was a transparent solid material that Isroth could clearly see through as he traveled on the slide. Outside the transparent material, there was a stunning sight that unfolded before his eyes. There was a city with countless buildings made from corals that scaled over 15 stories high. A gorgeous colorful soft blue hue lit up that entire area of the sea and a magnificent aurora was above the city. The aurora was filled with a myriad of colors and remained in a continuous circular motion around the sky of the city. Many merfolk that appeared to be citizens were swimming around below. Some of them had legs with scales on them like Calder, but most of them were just like the Sea Palace guards and possessed the lower body of a fish. There were even some citizens who had the upper body of a fish and the lower body of a human. It was a unique experience for most players, however, to someone like Isroth who had traveled throughout all 7 realms, it was not an uncommon sight. It's very similar to the third realm aka Zmin. A water-based society. The scene did not last for long as Isroth soon reached a more isolated part of the underwater world. It was unknown exactly how deep this sea actually was, but according to the Sapphire Gem, this was far from the deepest level. The whole trip lasted no longer than 15 seconds. When Isroth reached the end of the waterslide, he was in a badly lit and cold part of the sea. However, the rainbow, coral fish that drifted down here before him, provided Isroth with a source of light thanks to their colorful luminescent scales. System alert. You have entered the region Orcalian Trench. Isroth moved his hand to the waterslide and when he tried to enter inside, there was a strong force pushing his hand away. It seems as though I've taken a one-way trip. Isroth began to explore the Orcalian Trench and when he looked upward, he could barely notice the surface of the Great Kashish Sea. Though, there was probably some invisible boundary that would prevent him from swimming all the way up. After swimming for around 5 minutes, Isroth heard a faint sound. The further he swam, the louder the sound grew. When he listened closely, it resembled a whale song. It was difficult to lock on to the location of the whale song, it seemed to be echoing from every direction. Oh! This time, the sound clearly came from directly below Isroth's current position. He stared into the seemingly bottomless trench and did not see anything at first. But, a few seconds later, a massive eyeball opened up right next to Isroth. The eyeball itself was the size of a large house. Impossible, how could I have not sensed something so enormous? The size of the sea creature was colossal and easily spanned more than 100 meters in length. Isroth was more than close enough to get a look at the monster's name. Name: Colossal Sea King Skagmag, Legendary Boss, Level. A legendary boss with its level hidden. This meant that the level of this monster was much higher than Isroth's own level. The strange thing was that this boss did not bother attacking Isroth, and instead it just stared at him for a moment before continuing to swim onward. A legendary boss. How is that possible? Ednel.co There should not be a legendary boss in a dungeon with such a low level, even if this dungeon did have a hidden boss. If that was really the case, then no matter what, Wes would not have let him inside the dungeon. This information was too valuable to disclose to just anyone. Does that mean none of the players from Crosshaven ran into that creature yet? Isroth was thinking to himself when he received a system alert. System alert. You have received the temporary passive skill, Skagmag's Whale Song. Chapter 70 Memories of the Sea. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Everything around Isroth suddenly turned bright white. It was like his consciousness was being pulled into a different place. A few seconds later, he was standing in the air above a majestic city that made the one he viewed earlier seem insignificant in comparison. He tried to view his skills to see the effects of Skagmag's Whale Song, however, he was unable to access his skills at the moment. Where is this place? Before he knew it, Isroth was within a marvelous throne room. Sitting upon the throne was a mermaid who resembled the statue Isroth saw hidden within the strangely shaped plants. Her beauty was the stuff of legends. She appeared otherworldly as only the word perfect could describe the mermaid. She had long flowing aqua hair that if let down normally would reach all the way to the end of her tail, a beautiful pair of moonstone eyes that if one were to stare closely into, they would notice a boundless sea hidden within them. The scales on the lower part of her body were a pure aqua color and emitted a faint glow. It's her. No one seemed to notice Isroth's presence there. It was like he did not exist at all. Another odd thing was that Isroth could not feel the presence of anyone in the room, as though none of them were actually there. Standing in an orderly fashion below the throne area were 14 individuals. There was something unique about every one of them, but they all had one thing in common, and that was they were all sea creatures. Isroth surprisingly discovered a familiar face amongst the individuals present. It was a man who bore a striking resemblance to Calder, except he seemed to be more youthful and in his prime. Resting on that man's shoulder was a small rainbow, Coral King seahorse no bigger than 15 centimeters. Calder, you dare bring a pet before Her Majesty? One of the individuals snorted when he noticed the seahorse sitting upon Calder's shoulder. Unlike the mighty seahorse Isroth faced earlier that looked down on everything, this seahorse released a small whine before hiding behind Calder's back. The man really was Calder. Where exactly am I? Isroth examined his surroundings, but nothing seemed even remotely familiar to him. If Her Majesty has nothing to say about it, what gives you the right to, Glekken? Calder responded in a firm tone of voice. Doviko, the one called Glekken, had the face of an octopus and the body of a human. The main difference was that Glekken's arms were a pair of tentacles. But he did not have just 2 tentacles, he had a total of 8, with 2 of them being attached to his back. His eyes matched those of a cephalopod. Both of you, silence. You are in the presence of Her Majesty, it would be wise to show your respect. The one who spoke possessed the head of a jellyfish with countless tendrils and a strange spectral body. It was difficult to tell how it was speaking as no mouth was in plain sight. Since when do you speak for Her Majesty, Trestix? If anything, you're being arrogant to think that you can guess the wishes of Her Majesty on a whim. Glekken did not back down. The woman sitting upon the throne held the palm of her hand up. When she did, everyone present went completely silent. It's all right, Trestix. Even if we are not related by blood, I still consider all of us to be family. She gave a heartwarming smile that would melt the coldest of hearts. Your Majesty, please forgive my insolence, but you have the blood of the sea goddess Eotl flowing through your veins. You are her direct descendant. We are not worthy of such an honorable position in your heart, Your Majesty. Trestix lowered his head. We are not worthy, Your Majesty. Everyone else in the room lowered their heads as well. Even if everyone had disagreements or disliked one another, in the end, they would all die for this radiant and noble mermaid before them. She then glanced at Calder and then looked over towards Glecken. A rainbow, Coral King Seahorse is a rare existence in these waters. Calder must take good care of him if he hopes to maintain its respect and one day work together with it. After all, a rainbow, Coral King Seahorse is a noble mount. If Your Majesty says so, then obviously I have no issue with such a trivial matter. Glecken gave a respectful bow and did not mention anything about the seahorse again. Come, little one. Her voice echoed through the room, though it sounded more like a song with a pleasant and mesmerizing tune. It was a voice no sea creature could resist, the sea goddess Eotl's song. As a direct descendant of the goddess, the mermaid inherited her ability to naturally dominate all sea creatures. The rainbow, Coral King Seahorse was frightened and scared by suddenly being called out to, however, for some reason it suddenly felt really safe and trusted the voice calling to it. It was a little hesitant at first, but it swam over towards the mermaid and stopped before her. When it arrived before her, she reached out and gently took the rainbow, Coral King Seahorse into the palm of her hands. Little one, you must take good care of Calder when you're big and strong. Will you promise me this? She revealed a lovely smile that would make many people sigh in admiration. The rainbow, Coral King Seahorse turned its tiny body and looked over in Calder's direction. It made a light clicking sound and nodded its head. Despite its small appearance, it was a very intelligent creature. It then rubbed its head submissively on the palm of the mermaid. The atmosphere in the room was incredibly peaceful at that moment. However, the doors to the throne room were abruptly pushed open. When that happened, the 14 individuals standing below the throne facial expressions all darkened. Who could be so insolent as to charge into the room of Her Majesty? Just as they were about to rebuke this individual, when they saw who it was, none of them spoke out. This was someone who was close to their Majesty. Though Glecken still showed his displeasure at the disrespectful attitude of that person. Why do they seem so familiar? Isroth stared at the person who just barged into the room unannounced. For some reason, he felt as if he'd seen them somewhere before this, but he could not put his finger on it. Kashish. You must reconsider. The person who barged into the room was a middle-aged man with black hair that had streaks of gray showing, black eyes, and a strong appearance. He actually looked just like a human and did not have any traits of a sea creature visible. He gave off a powerful and suppressing aura that was not intentional, but it still engulfed the entire room and eventually, it felt as if the man was everywhere at once. However, the area of water surrounding the mermaid sitting upon the throne was unaffected. The one called Kashish was actually the name of the mermaid everyone kept referring to as Your Majesty. The same person who the great and boundless sea was named after. When Kashish noticed who it was, she could only return his advice with a helpless smile. I have already made up my mind. If we stand by and do nothing, then my people will suffer. I refuse to let the children of the sea go through such a thing. Kashish seemed to slowly become disheartened. If anyone can understand my intentions, it should be you. Uncle Skagmag. While he was not her uncle by blood, Skagmag and her father were very close and could be considered as brothers who fought side by side in the First Great Sea War. That name. It's the sea creature I met before coming here. Isroth remembered that the name of the colossal sea creature he saw just moments ago was Skagmag. It was too much of a coincidence for the two to be unrelated, and so they had to be the same person. Isroth met many existences capable of shape-shifting, especially if they were powerful enough. So he wasn't too shocked that RML also had similar creatures. After all, with how huge Skagmag is, it was impossible for him to travel to the throne room in his natural form. Skagmag let out a long and deep sigh. While I do understand your heartfelt intentions, you need to look past the present and into the future. If irreversible harm were to befall you, how could I ever face your father in the afterlife? There was a hint of worry in his eyes as he spoke to Kashish. A graceful smile found its way onto Kashish's face. She did not blame Skagmag for worrying and understood his concerns, however, she felt as though there was no other way. Then it is a good thing that you will not die any time soon, Uncle Skagmag. You will not have to face my father for quite some time. Skagmag shook his head and could not help but to also smile after seeing Kashish's expression. You have your father's stubbornness and your mother's intelligence. It is difficult to convince you. I knew that I would not be successful, however, I still had to give it a try. Kashish, I will remind you once again, every existence in this sea depends on you for guidance. Without you, there is no path left in the future for all the existences in the Great Sea. You must be extremely careful. Kashish nodded, your worries do not go unnoticed, I will be careful. You have my word. Skagmag scanned everyone in the throne room with a serious expression on his face. You all, be sure to take care of Her Majesty. If anything happens to her, don't expect to keep your lives. He then smiled at Kashish once more before turning and walking out of the throne room. When the doors closed behind Skagmag, the first to speak was Glekken. Your Majesty, I know that he is a close friend of your father, but he should show you more respect as the ruler of the Great Sea. Kashish looked coldly at Glekken. It was the first time she showed her displeasure towards anyone here. Glekken, because of your loyalty I shall ignore what you just said this one time. Do not let such words leave your mouth again or else next time, I will not be able to overlook it. Glekken immediately fell onto his knees and kowtowed. Your Majesty, I meant no offense, please forgive me for being so insolent. How could he not be afraid? The last thing he wanted to do was offend her. He just felt that as their ruler, she should naturally be above everyone else. Uncle Skagmag has the respect and power to speak to me as an equal. Not to mention, he was like a brother to my father and took care of me until I became old enough to sit upon this very throne. You do not understand because you have not witnessed his power firsthand, but what I can say is that even I am not confident in being victorious against Uncle Skagmag. Everyone was shocked and they heard those words leave her mouth. They knew that he was powerful, however, they never imagined that he reached such a high level in which he was capable of rivaling a direct descendant of the sea goddess Eatle. Alright, let's set that matter behind us. There's a reason I called you all here. It's time I visit the Overside world. We cannot afford to be at odds with them with what's soon approaching. Kashish spoke in a calm voice. While displeasure was visible on nearly all of their faces, all 14 of them knew that she was correct and so they could not express their disagreement. Good, since none of you disagree, we shall be leaving tomorrow. Nerida, Sakid, Trestix, you three shall accompany me. Kashish pet the head of the rainbow, Coral King Seahorse before releasing it back to Calder. Yes, Your Majesty. They all responded in unison and bowed respectfully. Everything around Isroth was replaced by a bright white light, and soon after he was back in the same location as he was just a few moments ago. The events that just unfolded made him feel as though he were in a dream. Why was I shown that? Isroth felt that it was more than just a simple cutscene that all players would experience in this dungeon. During normal cutscenes, players should be able to access their character window, however, Isroth was unable to do so. That showed how important the events that transpired were. There's no use in thinking too much on it. The answers will naturally reveal themselves when it is time. Isroth could only continue moving forward and cross that bridge when the time comes.